Okay, the February 1st, 2017 meeting of the Council on Aging is now being called to order. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Francine, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Allen? Here. Chair Fotheringham?
Here.
Commissioner Gitt? Present. Commissioner Gorbach?
Here.
Commissioner Hagee?
Here.
Vice Chair Healy?
Here.
Commissioner Maria?
Here.
Commissioner Mortimer? Here. And Commissioner Norkin?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Now is a part of our program where we open the floor to the public for public comments. I have one public comment speaker card. That's from Tony Gitt. Tony?
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Gitt. Normally I would provide status on the Conejo Valley Village during these meetings from my commissioner's seat up on the front there, but it's been pointed out to me that the Conejo Valley Village, while it was originally started by an event, by the creation of the village, was originally started from a study that the Council on Aging did. It's no longer part or has any connection with the city. The CVV, or Conejo Valley Village, is a nonprofit organization wholly independent from the city of Thousand Oaks. Therefore, I'm providing this Conejo Valley Village status report as a private citizen and as a member of the board of directors of the Conejo Valley Village. As you may know, the mission of the Conejo Valley Village is to help older citizens stay in their homes for as long as possible and remain socially connected to our community. We're a nonprofit organization. We were created in the second half of 2015, and our tax-exempt status was recognized by the IRS in the state of California early in 2016. Since that time, we've been hard at work recruiting members and volunteers, running fundraisers, and creating this Conejo Valley Village infrastructure. The Conejo Valley Village will hold its grand opening in early April. At that time, we will start providing services to our members. We are currently training our volunteers and honing our processes and procedures to ensure a smooth opening. If you are interested in becoming a member of the Conejo Valley Village or a volunteer, you may sign up at our website, online at conejovalleyvillage.org, or by calling us at our new number, 805-372-1826. We have available full memberships, social memberships, and a limited number of scholarships for those who qualify. We also welcome volunteers, and the volunteers are the people that run the Conejo Valley Village and perform the services for our members. Some of our members also choose to volunteer, so you can be both a member and a volunteer. So if you're interested, see our website at conejovalleyvillage.com or call us at 805-372-1826 or see me after this meeting for a free brochure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. We'll now turn to Commissioner reports, and leading off, Commissioner Gorbach on education.
Thank you, Chair Fotheringham. Well, there are a lot of things coming up this month, so let me just fill you in on a couple of educational opportunities that you might be interested in. Let's start with the library and the CLU lecture series that's called Trying to Hold the Moon, the 14th Century World by Professor Michaela Crawford, CLU professor. I haven't attended her series this year, but I did go to her series last year, and it was excellent. You will enjoy listening to her. And her next lecture is coming up next week, February 8th, at the Grant Brimhall Library at 7 p.m., and that is free. And then also at the library, this looks really interesting. This is coming up Saturday, February 18th. In honor of Black History Month, Michael D. McCarty, who is a professional storyteller, His stories inform, educate, inspire, and amuse. And he has told stories in South Africa, Zimbabwe, India, China, Jamaica. He's been traveling all over the world collecting stories from different cultures, and he's going to share those next, Saturday, February 18th, so in about 2 weeks at the Grand Brimhall Library at 11 to 11:45. And again, the same day, February 18th, at the Newbury Park Library from 2 until 2:45. Now, a couple of other things I wanted to bring to your attention at the Goebel Center coming up this month. And this is something I need a Twitter account. Everybody's tweeting, and I need to learn how to do this. And there is a Twitter class coming up. Yay! Coming up in March, early March, March 2nd. And if you're interested, it's one evening from 5 until 6. Let's see here. It's $20. And bring your smartphone. And they are also having a class on February 16th on Instagram. And on February 2nd, that's tomorrow already, February 2nd, tomorrow, $20 on intermediate Facebook skills. So those of you who are into Facebook, if you want to upgrade your skills a little bit, check out the class tomorrow at the library. And it's for individuals 50 and better. So you'll feel right at home there. And then finally, I had mentioned either last month or the month before that science tells us that one of the best ways to exercise our brains is by learning a new language. So if you ever have a chance, check out the spring program for Conejo Valley Adult Ed. For those of you in the audience, I put some in the back of the room. Let me just tell you, and these are still coming up. They haven't started yet. So these are starting in February. You can learn American Sign Language, or Japanese, or Chinese, or French, or Italian, or Spanish. And in all different levels, beginning, intermediate, and advanced. So go ahead, check out Conejo Valley Adult Ed, and pick up a new language this year. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I'd like to turn now to Commissioner Hagee for a report on fraud.
Hello, mature citizens. I like that. As I was leaving for this meeting, the phone rang, and I debated whether to answer. I answered it, and this is the IRS. We are initiating a lawsuit. Please call this number. I said, gee, that's great. I'm just going to be talking about fraud, And that's one of the big ones going around. How many of you have had one of those phone calls? Look, see? But people still fall for it. That's the problem. You got to be suspicious of these calls. And as I came into this meeting, Commissioner Mortimer told me about a scam that she was just approached on her TV. You want to our computer?
Yeah, email. Bank of America. Get an email, and it's got the Bank of America logo, letterhead, and it says that my online banking has been canceled because I've tried too many times with the wrong password, so they've blocked it out, and then they want you to click on this thing to verify. So I got it 3 times. I'm going, we just had a fraud expert talking to us in December. I said, I'm not stupid. Went to Bank of America and said, what was it, the IP address was kind of funky. And I gave it to them at Bank of America, and they said, no, send it to the abuse at Bank of America. So if you see that and get it, it's abuse@bankofamerica.com. You just forward the email to them.
Be suspicious of everything.
Thank you, Ron. I'd like to turn now to Commissioner Maria for something on social services.
Thank you, Chair Fotheringham. I want to talk today about an organization called Community Conscience, and it's a really great concept in providing care and assistance. And they're basically a nonprofit organization, but they own and operate the Human Services Center, which is housed here in Thousand Oaks and serves the greater Conejo Valley. And their concept is kind of an under one roof philosophy. So they have several social service agencies there in one location. And if you go to the next page, or the next slide, their mission is that they want to ensure that there's public assistance programs available and accessible for all of the basic service relief that those in need may need to take advantage of. And they also want to make sure that the facility is a permanent facility and that it's publicly accessible with public transit. They provide information to individuals that may not be aware of what assistance is out there. They really promote coordination among all of the different agencies. And then they're also raising awareness of the need for assistance. So in addition to providing it, they're also involved in raising awareness so we can get more services. And on the next slide, I mentioned they house 13 agencies. Here's just a few. They have the Conejo Free Clinic, which I talked about a couple of months ago, Hospice of the Conejo Valley, Senior Concerns and the Senior Concerns Bargain Boutique, Youth Employment Services, the County of Ventura Human Services Agency is there, Villa Esperanza Services, Life After Brain Injury, Fit for the Cause, and there's several others. And one of them on the next slide that we're really excited about is the Conejo Free Dental Clinic is coming soon, and this is going to be the first dental social service that we've had in Conejo Valley. Construction's underway soon or just starting. They will provide free dental care for those in need. It's going to be located right next door to the Conejo Free Clinic, so if you know where that is, you're going to be able to find the dental clinic. And it's set to officially open sometime early this year, so we'll keep watching for the actual date. If you're interested, on the next slide, if you're interested in helping Community Conscience, they take in honor or memorial gifts. Obviously, cash donations are always welcome. If you're still employed, most employers will do a matching. So if you donate $20, the company will match $20. There's also something fun coming up. If you're interested, you can buy a ticket or a table for their 2017 Mardi Gras Ball. It's going to be held at the North Ranch Country Club, live music, fun event, silent auction, and it's on Saturday, March 4th of this year. So if you're interested, you can go to their website. And on the next slide, I've got their contact information. They're at 80 East Hillcrest Drive, Suite 110 in Thousand Oaks. The phone number is 805-494-3543. You can email them at info@communityconscience.org or their website. Again, if you're interested in the Mardi Gras, go to the website, www.communityconscience.org. It's a great service.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Now we'll turn to our liaison reports. And the first one is the Ventura County Area Agency on Aging. I wanted to make you aware of a free memory screening that's available to you once a month. It's a screening that uses an instrument called the Brief Alzheimer's Screening Test. It's being offered on the fourth Monday of every month in the VCAAA offices, which are located at 646 County Square Drive in Ventura. And that is across Victoria Avenue from the Government Center, if you know your way there. These are being offered from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on a first-come, first-served basis. And note that it's free. So if you have some concerns that your memory is degrading a little faster than you think it ought to, and you're worried about noting that Alzheimer's is the fourth leading cause of death in Ventura County and so forth, it may be something you want to take advantage of. I'll give you some contact information for the person in charge. Her name is Christine Voth, V-O-T-H. Her phone number is 805-477-7305. So thank you very much. I'd like to turn the floor over to my colleague, Vice Chair Healy and so forth, to introduce our guest speakers on Conejo CSVP.
Okay. Thanks. Today we have an expert in from the Global Center who knows everything that goes on over there, and Mike is going to give our report on from both Patty Ham, who is usually here. She runs the Global Center very well, and Rick Tanaka, who runs the CSVP program, the volunteer program. Mike, take it away.
Thank you very much. First of all, from the CSVP, just a few weeks ago, we had our Wellness Fest. I'm sure many, if not all of you, were there. Rick wanted me to just say there was a smashing success. We had over 500 people attend, and he wanted to just give a big shout out to our big sponsors of Los Robles, Atria Senior Living, and the Home Helpers Group. And the other thing that just started this week is our free tax assistance. And it's started Monday, and it's going through April 13th. It runs Monday through Thursday from 8:30 to 4 p.m. They're doing them in the community building at the soccer fields, which is across the street from the Global Center. And we have flyers and maps and directions at the Global Center if people have questions about that. They're also doing them one day a week at the Newberry Park Library on Wednesdays from 8:30 to 4. And that'll run, like I said, all the way through April 13th. Onto the Global Center quickly. We do have open recruitment right now for our upcoming election of new commissioners for our Board of Commissioners. Applications can be picked up at our front desk. And then at the end of this month, we have our pre-qualifying tournament for our pool group that we have to select our team to fight the teens. End of this month, we'll do our in-house tournament. And then on March 2nd, we will have the teen versus senior billiards tournament, which is always a fun event. So those are coming up for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. The Global Center, if any of you haven't been, it's truly a great place to go. There's always something happening over there that's interesting and fun. So thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Norkin, do you have anything to add on the Global?
Yes, I do. The Global Center Commission is going to put on their next Music Comes Alive program on February 19th at 2:30 p.m. This will feature the surf tunes of the Beach Boys. There'll be a tribute band to the Beach Boys. Tickets are $5 and will be sold at the Global Center. But be careful, because the last couple of performances of the Music Comes Alive program have been sold out. So get your tickets early. It's going to be a great program. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Now is the time for commissioner comments. Do we have any commissioner comments today? Yes, Loretta.
Thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know that the Senior of the Year nominations are now open. So if you know some fantastic senior who's done a lot of volunteer work in their life, and especially during the last 3 to 5 years here in Thousand Oaks, you can nominate them online on the City of Thousand Oaks website, and the nominations will be open until April 1st. And then we'll have a dinner on June 8th to award the Senior of the Year and to honor all of the nominees. So if you know a individual or someone, if you're an organization and you want to nominate someone, please check out our website or get in touch with Francine, because she kind of coordinates all of that stuff. And one last thing, if you'd like to do a door prize, you will get recognition in the brochure that we have that we give out for Senior of the Year at the dinner. So think about that too.
Okay. Any other commissioner comments? Yes.
I had a quick one just to kind of tag on to Commissioner Hagee's on fraud. I heard this on the local news, and I hadn't heard this one before, but you know, we've all heard that catchphrase, "Can you hear me now?" So they're actually calling on the phone, and you'll hear, "Can you hear me now?" or "Can you hear me?" And when you answer yes, they're recording that yes. And there's several different organizations or things that you can validate buying a product or service by saying yes, and they're using that. So if you hear that catchphrase, or you know it's a number you don't know and you hear that, don't answer, hang up, or say no. And a lot of times if they don't get what they want the first time, you'll kind of get drawn into some kind of a conversation where they can take pieces they want, so just hang up. But I hadn't heard that one before, so I thought I'd share it.
All right. Are there any other commissioner comments? Okay, well, let's move on, and I'd like to introduce Commissioner Mortimer, who will introduce our guest speaker for today.
I'd like to introduce Dr. Janki Shah from UCLA Health. Dr. Shah earned her bachelor's degree at Stanford University and her medical degree at USC School of Medicine. She completed her internship and residency in internal medicine at UCLA School of Medicine, followed by her fellowship in cardiovascular disease at Kaiser Permanente Los Angeles Medical Center. Dr. Shah is board certified in cardiovascular diseases, echocardiography, and nuclear cardiology. Her clinical interests include women's health, coronary artery disease, congestive heart failure, and heart disease prevention. Let's please welcome Dr. Shah.
Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you very much for highlighting the importance of heart disease and aging. As I'll talk to you guys about today, it's definitely a big issue, and it's one that's largely preventable. So talking about the importance of it, the prevalence of it, and what we can do to stave it off is really important, and a topic that's very close to my own heart. So my topic today will be heart health in the aging population, but it really does apply to everyone, starting at a young age, to develop the heart healthy habits that will prevent the aging process to the extent that it can be. So you may be familiar with this, but the number of elderly people we have in our country is growing rapidly. In orange on this slide is the population aged 65 to 84, and in the maroon or burgundy color, it's 85 and older. And these are looking at census data. So starting on the far left is 1900, and now the most current we have is 2010, and then there's 2020 in red there, which is an estimate, and in 2030 as well, which I think got cut off a little bit. But it's estimated by 2030 that 20%, 1 in 5 people, will be over the age of 65. And so a lot of the issues you guys discuss here and a lot of heart issues are very important to address, because this is going to be a very large population with a large heart disease burden and also healthcare cost burden as well. So this is a busy slide, but let me summarize. The left side is the young heart, and on the right side is an aged heart. So in the yellow, if you see the yellow dots there, those are this yellow system with the branching towards the bottom is the electrical system of the heart. There in the sinus node is where your natural pacemaker of the heart is, and that's what generates the electrical impulse to start each heartbeat. And then that's conveyed down to the bottom chambers, which are the pumping chambers of the heart, through that specialized electrical tissue. So as we get older, the number of pacemaker cells that we have reduces in number, and that electrical system gets scarred down with age. So as people get older, then heart rate naturally drops. It tends to be a little slower when you're 80 than when you're 30. But if that process is accelerated, people may end up needing a pacemaker because their heart rate is too slow and it cannot fire as rapidly as it needs to serve the function of the heart. As the heart ages as well, the heart tends to enlarge slightly and the walls of the heart thicken. Also, if heart attacks happen, it can kill off some of the heart cells, which makes the heart function less effectively. On the bottom, we have a graphic of the blood vessel. So on the left, again, is the smooth muscle cells. We can see they're nice and thin. As we get older, those smooth muscle cells tend to lose their elasticity and they thicken, again, because of scarring. So as a result, our blood vessels are stiffer, and that's why high blood pressure is a prevalent problem as we age. So just as a general overview, coronary artery disease, which is disease of the heart arteries, causes about 70 to 80% of deaths in this age group over the age of 65. You may have heard of congestive heart failure. It's a heart problem, which is the most common cause of hospitalizations in this age group. Also, as I sort of alluded to, we can have problems with valve degeneration because of thickening of the heart valves as we age, heart arrhythmias because of problems with that electrical system, and the need for pacemakers because of the slowing of the electrical system, which is a normal part of aging. So this is a graphic that I really like because it really is a visual demonstration of how prevalent and what an important entity heart diseases are. This is the leading causes of death, with the size of each circle reflecting how prominent a cause it is. The yellow is the heart and circulatory disorders. And you can see that the second largest is cancer. Cancer is obviously a debilitating disease, but when we take all cancers combined, breast, lung, stomach, lymphomas, leukemias, all cancers combined, it's still far overshadowed by heart disease as a cause of death. Stroke, there in the burgundy, the nervous system disorders, is fourth. And heart disease and stroke really go hand in hand because they share the same risk factors, and the same things that cause heart disease can cause strokes. We call a stroke a brain attack. So preventing one is really preventing the other as well. So if you took together heart disease and strokes, it would be even a much larger circle. So the good news is that since around 2000, this is a graph showing mortality, or how many people are dying from heart disease. The red is females and the blue is males. So overall, for the last couple of decades, these numbers are trending down. So this is a great trajectory, and this is in large part due to the American Heart Association raising awareness. And also over the last couple of decades, we've had a lot of great new medicines, the development of stents, which we place in the blood vessels when someone has a heart attack or a blocked artery. So new devices, new medications, and a rise in the awareness. So overall, we're going the right direction. Since 1984, actually more women died of heart disease than men, and that trend was finally reversed last year when it was just slightly under. And this also is in large part due to the American Heart Association. You may have heard of the Go Red campaign, where they're really raising the awareness that women die of heart disease more than men, even though historically people have thought of it more as a man's disease or an old man's disease. But I'm very encouraged by this trend towards better and lower heart disease deaths in the United States. So what is coronary artery disease? Coronary artery disease is due to the buildup of fat and cholesterol, and it deposits in a form called plaques inside the blood vessel. That process is called atherosclerosis. You can get it not only in the heart arteries, but on also any blood vessel in your body, including the aorta, which is a major blood vessel. In the heart arteries, because they're such small caliber, they can actually occlude and cause narrowings and completely or partially occlude an artery. And that really is the where heart disease and heart attacks occur. So myocardial infarction is a fancy way of saying heart attack, and that's exactly what I was just referring to here, is when that fatty, waxy substance called cholesterol occludes the blood vessel, and as a result, there's no blood flow beyond that area of blockage, and all the heart muscle beyond it dies, and that is the definition of a heart attack. So it's really important to know and recognize the symptoms of a heart attack. So typical heart attack warning signs, we can imagine the Hollywood image of a man clutching his chest, collapsing to the floor. So severe chest pain. Usually people always correct me when I ask if they have chest pain. It's not a pain. It feels like a pressure or a heaviness. And the classic example, the classic phrasing people use is like an elephant sitting on my chest. It's like a tightness or a band around their chest. It can also include discomfort in the arms, shoulders, neck, or jaw, sometimes radiating to those areas or sometimes only in those areas. It's usually associated with shortness of breath and feeling fatigue and sweaty and just overall feeling weak and debilitated. Women can have these more typical symptoms, but women can also have and often have atypical symptoms or unusual symptoms. And this is partially why heart disease in women is easy to miss and has been missed, is under-recognized and undertreated, not only by the woman herself, but unfortunately also by doctors. So women can have just pain in their upper back or their jaw or their neck or even just their arm without the chest pain. They can only have shortness of breath. Sometimes they just feel like they came down with a really, really bad flu. Or sometimes I've had patients who just feel extremely fatigued, and it turned out to be because of their heart. Feeling anxious or just feeling like they can't eat anything. They just feel uneasy somehow. So the most important point here is that women can have unusual symptoms. And what I tell women is if you feel like something's not quite right, you need to get it checked out because it could be a sign of heart disease. So what are the risk factors for heart disease? On the left, I have what I call the traditional risk factors. These are the ones probably all of you have heard about. Smoking, obviously. I'm going to go through all of these a little bit more detail in subsequent slides. Diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, being overweight, being inactive, and then your family history. The non-traditional risk factors, I call them that because they're really new and evolving risk factors. Only in the last decade or so are we recognizing that some of these items do increase the risk of heart disease in later life. So a lot of pregnancy-related complications. So these are women in their 20s, 30s, maybe 40s having pregnancy complications that later in life increase your risk of heart disease. And I think it's really important to mention because OBGYNs don't do it. They deliver your happy, healthy baby, you're on your way, but they don't tell you, listen, you need to tell your doctor in 10, 20 years that you had this complication because it does increase your risk and you need to be paid closer attention to for heart and stroke disease risk factors. So this includes preterm delivery, gestational hypertension and preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, also autoimmune diseases, which tend to be more common in women, like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, are also heart disease risk factors. Breast cancer treatment. If you've had breast cancer, you need to talk to your doctor about the type of treatments you've had. Radiation, especially on the left side, can affect your heart. Certain chemotherapy agents also have long-term heart risks. Depression and stress are big ones. Women tend to have higher rates of depression and also tend to handle stress more poorly, and this can take a toll on the heart. So reducing the risk of heart attacks, there's certain factors that we can control. So that's the half glass full. 80% of heart attacks and strokes actually are preventable. And addressing these issues are the ones that we should be focused on. The things we can't control, we can't turn back that time. We can't change our age. Better or worse, we can't change our family or the genes they handed down to us, but it is important to know your family history and relay that information to your doctor so they can assess whether you're at higher risk, not just for heart disease, but for cancers and other diseases. Can't change your ethnicity. Certain ethnicities have a much higher risk. African Americans, South Asians have the highest risks of heart disease. If you've already had a heart attack or a stroke, or you had any of those pregnancy complications I mentioned, definitely something to bring up to your doctor, but there's not much you can do about it now. I'm going to talk in more detail one by one of these risk factors that can be controlled. So age, as I mentioned, 80% of people die of heart disease over the age of 65 at this point in time. As you saw, the trend is getting towards fewer and fewer people dying of it, but it still remains at this point in time the number one cause of death. And after 65, a woman at the same age as a man having a heart attack is much more likely to die in that first year after the heart attack. So we women have worse outcomes in that first year. And it's unclear why, but it's a fact at this point. So this is the prevalence of cardiovascular disease. So this is heart attacks, strokes, and high blood pressure. On the left is age 20 to 39. Then 40 to 59, then 60 to 79, and 80 plus. And the men are in gray and the women are in white. So you can see over the age of 80, almost everybody has one of those conditions. And aging is obviously a huge risk factor for developing them. Gender. So overall, men have a slightly higher risk of having coronary artery disease, but again, women fare worse when they do have it. Before menopause, women actually have a lower risk of it. That being said, the young women who do get it are more likely to die. So younger women, especially between 45 to 54, who are first of all, they're getting heart disease at a higher rate than they ever have. Even though you saw on that graph, people are dying less and less of heart attacks. The only group that hasn't seen that change is that women between 45 to 54 are dying more. And then after menopause, the risk starts to catch up to men for women. So smoking, I'm hoping soon enough there'll be a day I don't even need to mention this when no one's smoking anymore. But unfortunately, still about 19% of men and 15% of women smoke. I think that's nationally. I think those numbers are better in California, where we're a lot more health conscious. But smoking causes plaque to form in those blood vessels, and then clots can form, and that's what causes an acute heart attack or a sudden heart attack and sudden death. It reduces your good cholesterol, which is the cholesterol that goes through your bloodstream and cleans out the plaques. So you have less of that floating around if you're a smoker. It can, as I mentioned, cause cardiac arrest or heart arrhythmias that cause you to die. It raises blood pressure in and of itself. And smoking puts women who smoke at a far worse risk than men who smoke. So it disproportionately affects women in terms of their heart risk. The good news is if you quit smoking, the results and the health benefits are almost immediate. Within 2 years, your risk of heart disease is 1/3 of what it was before. And once you've stopped smoking for over a decade, it's like you never smoked. You don't even need to, basically don't need to tell us about it as far as heart risk goes. You should still tell us. But it's great. I mean, it's something to encourage people to stay on the wagon and stay off cigarettes. So just as a graphic, this is a graph showing what people who never smoked with the risk of 1. For people who smoke about half a pack a day, anywhere from 1 to 14 cigarettes, 3 times higher risk of death. And for people who smoke 15 cigarettes or more, that's 3/4 a pack, it's 5.5 times the risk of death and heart disease. So again, just like women, I mentioned they're more likely to die after a heart attack, so are smokers. And we need to remember that people who smoke cigars and pipes and who've been exposed to secondhand smoke are also at risk for this. So when we ask people if they smoke, we also ask them if they have these other secondhand smoke exposures, because it does increase their risk. So obesity, as you all know, is an epidemic in our country. 34% of adults are overweight. 34 are obese. So that puts 2/3 of our population in the United States as either overweight or obese. 1/3 of children now are either overweight or obese. So this is a problem that's starting at a very, very young age. As we get bigger and bigger, for every unit of body mass index, and I'll show you what that is in just a minute, there's an almost 30% increase in your likelihood of developing heart disease or stroke. So body mass index is actually a measure of your body fat, where we take into account your weight, in relation to your height. And there's a formula, and there's an app for that, of course. You can figure out your body mass index, or your doctor can tell you, but it's your weight in kilograms over your height in meters, and we square it. And a healthy weight is a body mass index between 18.5 to 24.9 or 25. Above 25 is overweight, above 30 is obese, and above 40 is morbidly obese. So this I think is a very startling graphic. On the far upper left is the year, I think these years got cut off too, 1990. On the right is 1999, and in the bottom is 2010. And the colors, starting with light blue, is less than 10% of the country 10% of that state being obese, less than 10%. Medium blue is 10 to 14%. Bright blue is 15 to 19%. That beigeish yellow color is 20 to 24%. Red is 25 to 29%. And then the burgundy is greater than 30%. So you can see decade by decade, we're just getting fatter and fatter. And now the South, some of those states have greater than 30% obesity rates. And so this is an epidemic that we need to address at a larger level, but we can certainly start at an individual level in your families. So it's an independent risk factor for heart disease, meaning if you have nothing else wrong with you, your risk of heart disease just because of your body fat does increase. But in addition to that, having that extra weight increases your blood pressure, leads you to having a higher risk of diabetes and cholesterol and stroke. And then there is a difference in risk. Your risk is higher if the weight is around your stomach, which we call an apple shape, versus around the hips or pear shape. And the good news is that a minimal weight loss, even 5 to 10% of body weight, really does reduce significantly your risk of both heart disease and diabetes. So this is looking at a study called the Nurses' Health Study, where they had 120,000 women who were followed for two decades. And they showed that people who had a healthy weight had a risk of 1.0 of dying of heart disease. And if they were just slightly overweight with their body mass index just above 25%, they still had a slight increase, 40%, of having heart disease over the next 2 decades. But as you got fatter and fatter or heavier and heavier, that risk really started to skyrocket. The good news is also that we can combat it with a low-risk diet. So this is the same study that showed that women who had the highest consumption, 5 on the far right is a risk of 1, in terms of how much vegetables, fruits, whole grain, fish, and legumes they ate. They had a lower mortality than someone who had barely any of that, who's scored as a 1. So this is the risk of heart attacks. And so certainly you can see the effect of diet and how protective it can be. So what is a healthy diet? The American Heart Association has their recommendations for a heart-healthy diet, and they recommend 5 cups of fruits or vegetables a day, ideally not canned or with sugared syrup. 3.5 ounces or more of whole grains a day. So whole wheat flour, bulgur, oatmeal, brown rice. 2 to 3 servings of fish, ideally oily fish per week that have the omega-3 fatty acids that helps to, 1, be an anti-inflammatory, and 2, lower the cholesterol. And very little added sugar a week, ideally less than 450 calories. And also they recommend a low sodium diet, and that is hard to achieve, that level of 1,500 milligrams a day. But it's a goal, but as close as you can get to that, it's going to be beneficial. So exercise is another way to combat being overweight or obese. Exercise helps in losing the weight. It actually raises the good cholesterol levels, the ones I mentioned before that go and scavenge the plaques out of the heart arteries. It helps to lower blood pressure. And the American Heart Association also has recommendations on how much is enough exercise. And they recommend 150 minutes of moderate exercise, which is anything that helps you break a sweat. So brisk walking, playing tennis, or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise like sprints and things like that. When we talk about a target heart rate, there's a formula and there's an app for that, or you can talk to your doctor. But you really want to target 50 to 75% of your maximum, which is age-predicted heart rate. And this is another graphic showing on the far left people who exercise 1 hour per week, going to 2 hours per week, 3 hours per week, 4 hours per week, and 5 hours per week as we move to the right. People who walk is in red and any exercise is in gray. People who walk or exercise 5 hours a week have a 50% reduction in heart disease. So there's some motivation right there. So diabetes is another risk factor. This is also becoming an epidemic, not just in our country, but around the world. Increases the risk of heart disease by 2 to 3 times. Just in 2011, 30% of people who had coronary or heart stents placed were diabetics. Every year, almost 300,000 heart attacks, 2 to 4 times higher heart disease risk. And in women, it's actually much higher, as I'll show you. That's an average. And if you're a diabetic, statistically, you're likely to die of heart disease, 60% chance that you're going to die of heart disease before anything else. This is dramatic. As I mentioned before, smoking disproportionately affects women, but so does diabetes. So the black dotted line there is the risk of women dying of diabetes compared to women who don't have diabetes. It's 6-fold higher. And when you compare diabetic men to non-diabetic men, it's about 3 to 4 times higher. So diabetes in a woman is sort of a double whammy. So this is just how prevalent disease and how troubling a disease is diabetes in the U.S. So 70,000 deaths from diabetes. 20% of healthcare dollars go to diabetic patients. It's the 7th leading cause of death in and of itself, and it costs the country $174 billion. Right now, approximately 9% of Americans are diabetics, but it's thought in the next 2 decades, about 30%, a third of people will be diabetics. So another risk factor that's modifiable, something we can change, is hypertension. High blood pressure is considered a silent killer because unless you go and get it checked somewhere, you're never going to know you had it because there's no symptoms. But it's wreaking havoc on the inside of your body, to your heart, to your brain, your kidneys. So it's important to get your numbers checked regularly. This is sometimes a moving target, but at this point in time, what we recommend is less than 120/80 as a blood pressure target. And I'll say the only exception in that is the very elderly. We don't want to aim too low. We allow it to be a little bit more liberal. But generally, a normal blood pressure is less than 120/80. If it's above 140/90, it's considered high. If it's over 160/100, it's very high or stage 2. And if that top number is above 180 or the bottom number is above 110, that's a hypertensive crisis by definition. So as we get older, high blood pressure tends to become more common. Again, as I mentioned very early on, our vessels start to get stiffer as we age, and that's one of the reasons this happens. So this is the prevalence of high blood pressure starting in your 20s on the far left, up to age over 75 on the far right, men in gray, females in white. And you can see in the middle age group there, 55 to 64, once you hit that, if you have high blood pressure, you're right there with half the people your age, because half of people at that age group have it, and it only goes up from there. If you don't have it when you're over 75, you're in a very small select population. About 30% of men don't have it yet, and 20% of women don't. So again, I mentioned it's a silent killer, but what this graph shows is on the far left, there's a blood pressure of 115/75. And as the numbers go up, that's the increase in your risk of dying. So for every 20-point increase in blood pressure, you have a 2 times higher risk of dying of blood pressure problems and heart disease. So it's very, very important to keep this number in check. And statistically, women tend to be undertreated for blood pressure by their doctors. So it's important that you know the numbers and make sure that those numbers are being targeted by your internist. So medications are one way to treat blood pressure, but I always like to start with lifestyle modifications. Weight reduction, as I mentioned, but just so you know, losing 10 kilograms, which is 20 pounds, which for a lot of us here is a lot, but for some people who are very overweight need to lose that, they can drop their blood pressure 5 to 20 points and possibly not have to take any medications whatsoever. Changing your diet to the kind I mentioned before, which is very rich in fruits and vegetables, low-fat dairy, low fat, can also drop your blood pressure 8 to 14 points. If you can restrict your sodium less than 2.5 milligrams, you can drop it another 2 to 8 points. Being physically active, 30 minutes most days, you can drop it another 4 to 10 points. And if you limit alcohol, that can drop it. So you can see here, even if you're in the stage 2 hypertension, you make all these changes, there's a good chance you don't need to be on medications. So what's the benefit of lowering your blood pressure? So if you can lower your blood pressure, you can reduce your risk of stroke by 40%. Your risk of heart attack by 25%, and your risk of congestive heart failure by 50%. So high cholesterol, when you get your cholesterol profile, you should get it at least once a year on average. If your total cholesterol is less than 200, you're doing great. That's a good number. But that total cholesterol is split into a good cholesterol, which is the HDL, and we want that to be high. If it's less than 40, it's too low. Ideal is above 50. The more you have, the more plaque it's going to go scavenge and protect you from heart attacks and strokes. The LDL cholesterol is the bad cholesterol. That's the one as cardiologists we really target. We say we want it less than 130 for someone who's young and healthy and has no other problems. If someone has heart disease or risk factors for heart disease, we want it below 100. And in someone who's at very high risk of heart disease, we actually target below 70. So we're very aggressive about that. This is hard to see, and what this is a ASCVD risk estimator. This is just a screenshot of an app, and what it is when you come in to see your doctor, you should ask them every year when you get your heart checkup, what's my 10-year risk score? Meaning, what is my 10-year likelihood of having a heart attack or a stroke? Because this is something we can estimate, and this modeling has been done based on tens and tens of thousands of patients. So we take into account your gender, your age, your ethnicity, whether you're a smoker, what your cholesterol values are, whether you're diabetic, what your blood pressure is. We take into account many variables about you, and it spits out a number. What's considered high risk is if it's higher than 7.5%. So if your chance of developing heart disease over the next 10 years is 7.5%, you're at risk of that heart attack that we talked about earlier, and we would recommend getting treatment or lowering that cholesterol. So should we give diet a try? Absolutely. Just like with blood pressure, I absolutely recommend to my patients that they try lifestyle modifications. Low-fat diet, increasing exercise. But if someone's at very high risk, such as they've already had a heart attack or a stroke, really they need to be doing this with medicine. They need to complement each other. But diet alone can reduce your cholesterol by 5% or so, as can exercise. So you may have heard of statins. It's the most common cholesterol medication we use. They reduce your cholesterol, and even in people who have low cholesterol or normal cholesterol, it can still reduce your risk of death or stroke or heart attacks, and the need for needing angioplasty or bypass surgery. There are side effects from this medicine, and the reason I mention this is because I think in the mainstream media, they're really overblown what these side effects are. Liver damage, which is largely reversible, happens in less than 1% of people. Muscle damage happens in less than 0.5% of people, and again, most of this is reversible. Muscle aches can happen without damage in about 5% of people, but generally, we can find a dosage of a statin, even if it's a weaker one, that doesn't cause these side effects. Another one I didn't list here because it's not been shown in studies that this is the case, but this is something that I hear about from my patients all the time, is that they're concerned about memory loss with statins. And this is one of those kind of confusing areas because it's anecdotal. People do feel like aren't as sharp anymore with their memory, and it may be true. But when it's been studied in trials, it's actually been shown that patients with dementia and a lot of cognitive memory loss actually have improved with statins. It's actually been recommended as a treatment for dementia. So it's not clear It's not clear that this is whether this is a concern psychologically that people are losing memory or not, or whether it's real. It just hasn't played out yet in any kind of scientific study that it does cause memory loss. And the last modifiable risk factor is stress and how we handle stress. So we all have stress hormones called norepinephrine and dopamine, adrenaline you may have heard of, that underlies our fight or flight response. So when there used to be a tiger in the caveman days, we wanted that to help us get the energy and bolt out of there. So they increase your heart rate, they increase your blood pressure, and they increase your blood flow to your muscles so you can bolt. But in the short term, these can be good, but long term, they can give you a higher risk of heart disease and stroke. And women tend to have higher stress hormone levels, and that may be why we have higher rates of heart disease deaths. So the Northridge earthquake, do you guys remember that? So in 1994, there was a Northridge earthquake. When we looked at heart attacks in the 3 years preceding in the month of January, and it was pretty steady. But the year of the Northridge earthquake, the day of, huge rise in heart attacks, and that just shows the effect of stress. It was a very stressful time. It was very traumatic, and so that shows that bad stresses can happen, and it certainly puts a risk on our heart. But it doesn't need to be something literally as earth-shattering as an earthquake. So this is an increase in heart attacks in England after they lost a soccer game to Argentina in 1998. And for the day of, a day after, and 2 days after, there's a huge increase in heart attacks. So I just was on call all through the holidays over Christmas, and I saw a lot of heart attacks because people were stressed about the holidays. Heart attacks and strokes tend to peak around the holidays because it's a good stress, but it's a stress. So how can we reduce stress in our life? Decreasing the antioxidants and processed foods and stimulants in our diet. Exercise is a huge one. So regular exercise, both cardiovascular and weight bearing, is beneficial. And mindfulness. I really recommend yoga and meditation to my patients. A lot of my patients really enjoy Tai Chi. And if necessary, seek counseling, because it's really important to be able to identify what the psychosocial triggers are for your stress and either try to avoid those or to find ways to mitigate the stress you feel in those situations. So what can you do to prevent heart disease? So I did try to tell you what the heart disease risk factors are that are modifiable and what kinds of things can help them. But first it needs to be identified. And so this is what I recommended everybody ask their doctor. It's what's my 10-year risk score? So everybody should have that number in mind and know what their risk score is and where that risk is coming from, and then address that underlying problem. So what's involved in a heart screening? So your doctor should be getting a detailed history talking about all those risk factors, both the modifiable and the non-modifiable ones with you. Do a detailed physical exam, check your blood pressure, your body mass index, listen to your heart and lungs, check your pulses, make sure your circulation's good. You've probably all had an EKG before to look for any heart electrical issues, and then blood tests to check for diabetes and cholesterol. Another one I often do is something called a HSCRP, which is an inflammatory marker that helps to assess heart disease risk and stroke risk. So it tells you just 3 things. Are you at low risk, average risk, or high risk in general for it? And if someone's at high risk, I may be more aggressive about their blood pressure goal or their cholesterol goal. And based on the screening, you may be recommended to have further tests. Maybe you need to have a picture of your heart taken or a stress test. So an ultrasound or an echocardiogram may be recommended if you want to see how strong your heart is, or if we hear a heart murmur, to see if you have any wear and tear of your heart valves. If we're worried about heart artery blockages, we may recommend a stress test. A calcium scan is something we do in people who have a family history of heart disease to see if they have any plaque buildup without having to do any invasive tests. It's just a low radiation CT scan of the chest. Sometimes we do a higher resolution ones and do a non-invasive angiogram, so we can actually see the heart arteries and see if there's any blockages without having to go in and directly inject something into the heart. But, sometimes we do end up with an angiogram, which is an invasive test, and we find a blockage like on the left there, and we open it up with a balloon and the stent and get a picture like on the right, and that helps to alleviate heart disease symptoms. So this is a busy slide, but just knowing your numbers, in addition to knowing that 10-year risk score, I really encourage everyone to know their cholesterol values, their blood pressure, their body mass index, your blood sugar levels. These are really critical numbers that you need to know and that could save your life if you keep them in the target range. The American Heart Association has a simple and practical guide you can look up online called Life Simple 7. And it's sort of all the things I talked about and we all probably already know. But again, just to summarize, get active, 150 minutes a week of exercise, controlling your cholesterol, eating better, try to enjoy foods that are real foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and really try to avoid added sugars and processed foods. Manage blood pressure. Again, the number for that you want to keep in mind is below 120/80. Losing weight. So you don't want to be one of the 2/3 of Americans who are overweight or obese. You want to keep your health in the healthy range. You want to keep your blood sugar out of that diabetic level, especially for women where you saw that the risk is significantly magnified as a female diabetic, and stop smoking as well. And to summarize, your doctor may say, lose some weight, quit smoking, move around more, and eat the carrot to the snowman. And I just want to remind everyone that this Friday, well, today is the start of Heart Month, so Heart Awareness Month, so I'm glad we're having this talk here today. And this Friday is National Wear Red Day, so I want everyone to wear their red this Friday and tell all your loved ones, your friends, your families, your moms, your daughters, that women die of heart disease more than any other disease, and we need to spread the word that women should get their regular heart checkups. So that's all I have.
Are there any questions from the commissioners? Yes.
Before I ask the question, I want to let everybody know that the video and PowerPoint will be available at our website, www.toaks.org/seniors. My question is, does AFib fit into any of this, and what causes that? What causes that, and what can be done about it?
Okay, so to answer your question, there's a whole spectrum of heart diseases. AFib is different than coronary artery disease and the things I was mentioning here. So atrial fibrillation is a heart arrhythmia. If you remember my first picture where I showed the changes in the electrical conduction system, as we get older, our electrical system starts to fail and it starts to degenerate. So one of the common heart arrhythmias that arises is called atrial fibrillation. And what it is multiple sites in the top chamber of the heart, the atria, firing rapidly and overtaking your natural pacemaker of your heart, because your natural pacemaker is not doing its job as well as it used to. So the main concerns with atrial fibrillation is, one, it can go really fast, and so you need to be on medicines to slow it down. But the most dangerous thing is it can lead to a risk of stroke because you can get clots in your heart. So people with atrial fibrillation need to be on blood thinners to prevent those clots from forming.
Yes, Nancy.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
You're welcome.
I personally will be 10 years this coming Valentine's Day since I had a heart attack in my office. So, and the biggest thing I could tell people that I did so stupidly was I was really sick. I sat in my office until I felt better. I get on the 23, drive home, could have killed myself, could have killed someone else on the road.
Yeah.
I get home, and they said, go to the hospital. And instead of calling 911, I got in my car and drove, again, risking myself and others. So if it happens, I had no idea it was a heart attack. It was all those women's symptoms, no chest pain.
Yeah.
And I could have killed myself or somebody else by getting in my car and not just calling 911. So hope I'll do that next time. So.
Yeah, and there's actually, American Heart Association did a survey of women. They asked them, here's a list of symptoms. If you had a friend or a family member who had these symptoms where they're short of breath, they couldn't breathe, they're sweating, they felt nauseous, what would you do? You would tell them call 911. But if it's yourself, less than half of women would do it for themselves.
Just do it.
Okay, I'm sorry, we can't take questions from the audience until after we adjourn the meeting. Are there any other questions? Yes, Karen.
Thank you for an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Are there longitudinal studies on the use of statin drugs? They've been around for a while now, and folks who start on them at 50, 55 years old, are they just on them, for the long term, or what are the long-term studies on those, please?
Right. I don't think that there's any most of these studies are done in order to get a medication approved for a certain reason. Sometimes they're drug company sponsored. Sometimes they're done by scientists looking to find an indication to get it to benefit their patients. So in terms of longitudinal, we don't have any what we consider the gold standard randomized controlled trials that go on for decades and decades. They tend to be observational. In terms of your question of does someone who gets started at 55 end up on it lifelong, it depends on their indication. In someone who's had a heart attack or a stroke, pretty much they're committed to that lifelong, that and aspirin. But in someone who's on it because their cholesterol is high, and they haven't had one of either a heart attack or a stroke, if they can get it down with other measures, lifestyle modifications, it's not a life sentence for them.
All right. Yes, Ron.
One of the earlier slides you showed, there was blockage in the heart, and below that there was damage to the heart because of the lack of
blood flow. Mm-hmm.
First of all, can that blockage be cleared? And secondly, does the heart then repair itself, or is that damaged for good?
Great question. So if we find a tight blockage, we can open it up with a balloon angioplasty, where we inflate a balloon in there, move all that plaque out of the way, and then place a stent, which is a metal scaffold in there to keep that artery open in that spot so it's no longer narrow. The second part of your question really depends on the timing. So if someone comes in right when they start to have symptoms, opening up that artery can salvage that heart muscle. But if someone comes in a day or 2 days later, sometimes that heart damage is irreparable and they have a scar.
All right. I'd like to, yes, Tony?
Are there any DNA tests that can predict or show heart attack or coronary disease?
There are no DNA tests at this time. I think it's primarily because it's an acquired disease. It's not something that you are necessarily born with a genetic predisposition to have 7 decades later.
Okay, I understand we have an announcement from your... Barry?
Yes, I have a question. If a patient has had an aortic valve replaced and they don't last forever, say 9, 10, 12 years, can they now be replaced through the artery as a replacement for a new valve?
So this is a new technology. It's called TAVR, or transcutaneous aortic valve replacement. And yes, there are some centers, including UCLA, who are looking at doing it minimally invasively, replacing a valve within a prior artificial valve.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm told your colleague has an announcement.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for being here. A great turnout. And what I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Himali Deve. I'm a patient liaison with the UCLA Health here in the North Valley, and I assist and navigate with patient concerns as well as lead the Speakers Bureau here. So if you have any questions after this, we have Dr. Shaw practicing here in Thousand Oaks, which is right around the corner here. And if you have any questions, please come to me. I think she has to leave soon, so we'll conclude here.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to call this meeting adjourned. And as soon as we're off TV, we may be able to get in a question or two from the audience. Okay, if there's anybody in the audience who want to ask